episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. Arguably our real first show of 2025, even though I was covering the Alexander brothers this past Friday, who are in federal court accused of some heinous crimes, and they're back. Orrin Alexander is back in court tomorrow. I'll be there to bring that to you live. But of course, here we are waiting for Shanna Gardner. Apologies for the delay, but it is out of our hands. The pool camera was not up, not ready, nowhere to be found. But lo and behold, it appears that they were running late, and we are back. How were your holidays, Ryan Vescio? Did you get some rest?
Good, nice and quiet. Although it's getting cold here, as you know, so it's get out the winter blankets in the boots.
Yeah, exactly. It's people are going to be mad when we discuss this, but it will drop into the possibly even the 40s. But it's going to be the coldest air Florida has seen in the last 2 years coming to us in a day or two, which will hopefully.
35 degrees means we can't leave the house. So
yes, right. Yeah, exactly. So, Shanna Gardner, she's got a hearing again today. She's had other ones with her co-defendant, who's Mario Fernandez Saldana. The two are accused in a very similar murder for hire plot that we were covering, with Dan Markel and the Adelson. So, it just has so many similarities. It's obviously in Florida that we decided, we were going to cover this as well. But Ryan Vescio, to you, and by the way, for those who do not know, Ryan is a former homicide prosecutor. And are you now going to be doing criminal defense in your new role?
Just a sprinkling of it. So I continue to have a robust victims' rights practice, but we'll be handling some criminal defense as well.
Okay. And can I tell them who you're working with?
You can.
Mark NeJame, who is one of Orlando's, if not one of the most prominent criminal defense attorneys, who's been on our show. And hopefully we'll get him on here with Ryan. But he's been there for many, many years, covered many of the biggest cases out of Florida. But Ryan, to you, as we're waiting for this to start here, and we're not exactly sure what they're going to be discussing. They're trying to obviously get death off the table here, because right now, as it stands, it's on the table. But just in terms of conspiracies here, because we're talking about an alleged trigger man who's not really alleged because he came out and confessed to the crime. And he's probably going to be state's witness. But how tough is it now? Now they're basically trying to say that Shanna has no connection to Henry Tenon, who is the admitted trigger man.
Well, these are the classic type of case where you're just linking chains of evidence. And 25 years ago, if this case were to have been prosecuted, it'd be much more difficult. But what you see in this case are text messages and communications and pay records and all these things. So to convict Shanna Gardner, all the state's going to have to prove is that she intended that a death occur, and she took a step in furtherance of that intent. So in these types of cases, especially when you have one of the defendants flip, it can mean lights out for everybody else who's still pending.
Yeah. Interesting, again, because Henry Tenon, who is the admitted trigger man, he was arrested, charged with second-degree murder, and then he basically spilled all the beans. So you just heard Ryan say that, now the rest of the dominoes might fall. One of the interesting things that came up previously is this, and it's one of the more recent things, is financial transactions that investigators here have presented evidence of financial transactions. Now it's just between the estranged husband, Mario Fernandez Saldana, and Henry Tenon, the admitted triggerman, but it includes checks totaling $10,000. Not a lot of money, but is that enough money, Ryan, that they can show to a jury, and say, hey, this was the money that was used to pay this guy to kill Jared Bridegan?
Absolutely. There's not a financial threshold. Now, had it been $500,000 or something like that, it'd be a little more sensational. But one of the things that investigators are going to look for here is the history of financial transactions between the two. So if you have somebody who's not sending money, writing checks, doing Venmos, those sorts of things to the gunman, and now all of a sudden a $10,000 check drops out of anywhere, then that's really suspicious. The other thing that investigators would look for is, how much money did Fernandez have in his account? What type of transactions was he doing? If he had a $500,000 bank account, then a $10,000 transaction is significant, but maybe not out of the course of conduct. But if he's got $47 in his checking account and all of a sudden is moving that type of money, that's a problem. And in these types of cases, where it then extends to Shanna, is all of her bragging about the new husband, and Fernandez is this and that, and he'd be great to kill him. And I mean, it's a classic case where investigators and the prosecutors may or may not have to show some sort of link between Shanna and Fernandez of the money or the source of the money. But as a defense attorney, that's definitely where I would want to try to fight this case, to say that Shanna was running her mouth, but it didn't amount to her knowing that the victim was going to be killed.
What about this? Mario flips to get Shanna the death penalty here. I don't know that there's any love lost between the two of them. They're estranged now. What do you think of that? Do you think the state is leaning on the estranged husband here, Mario Fernandez Saldana?
Well, they're likely to be doing so. It's the case for death against Shanna as not being the gunman. That's a tough case. It's a really tough case. Putting aside just the fact of gender bias here, she wanted it done, but she didn't have the ability to carry it out herself, or the fortitude to carry it out herself. Asking jurors to find that her actions were so cold, calculated, and premeditated to warrant execution, I think it's a bit of a stretch for her. I really do. And, of course, with Florida being one of the two non-unanimous death penalty states, the state has a little bit better of a chance. But a lot of times in these types of cases, seeking the death penalty, it's done in good faith by prosecutors. It's not something that any prosecutor takes lightly, but in the same sense, it just completely changes the context of the case, to where it's not one so much about guilt at that point. It is really a case about what happens.
Yeah. So True Lifestyles, whose first name is Susan, is amazing, and she lives in Jacksonville, and has been following this case closely. She writes here: the defense and prosecution are supposed to come to an agreement today about the agency that's going to redact privileged information from 7 to 10 terabytes of docs. So, Ryan, one of the issues here is that the defense is basically calling out the government, the state, saying that they were privy to some privileged attorney client information. The state says, no way, we were just looking through documents. And this has been like a back and forth that's been going on for a really long time. I mean, how often does that happen, where the defense really goes after? I mean, they basically said that they want, thank you, Space Coast, but they say that, they really want a new prosecution team, and the state's telling them to get lost.
Well, I think there's two separate issues here. The first is the government screwed this up. taint teams and privilege reviews, this is not a new concept. Pretty much all prosecutorial agencies and larger law enforcement entities, they have these procedures in play, and it's a pretty simple process. This isn't rocket science here. It is creating a group that is insulated from the investigation, that takes those materials and they put them in a bucket. Now, in reviewing what's been happening in this case, I think the defense has done a pretty good job of confusing the issues on these taint reviews. And in the same sense, the state attorney's office and ATF and the other, the Secret Service, have really, they haven't been on their game here. And I'll give you a perfect example. So when you're downloading a phone, yes, it's important to download everything on that phone so that there's no arguments from people like me that's incomplete data and we don't know what's on the phone and law enforcement's misrepresenting. That's why they copied it piece by piece, which is fine. The software is so advanced to where within that bucket that they collect, they can segregate out these privileged communications and do it in a way that keeps the evidence integrity in place, meanwhile protects the interest of defendants. So, I mean, the state has really stepped in it here, and the defense has had a pretty decent argument that because they have made these mistakes and intentionally exposed themselves to inadmissible information, that maybe somebody else should come in. And when you look at Judge Kite's recent order, who's a very, very good judge, I've known her for several years now, who is very attention detailed. She's been put in a place to say, okay, I've looked at this information that violated Shanna's constitutional protections, and the court found that information would not lead to additional evidence that would be used against Shanna in a trial, which is the state winning the day by technicality, but it doesn't endorse or support the bad behavior.
Just looking at some of the comments, people are rolling in. It is a Monday. It's a slow Monday here, but it is moving along now. So a couple of things. So as far as the death penalty goes, the defense, this was interesting to me. And forgive me because I don't know the proper legal language here, but when they are to get to potential deliberations in the death penalty phase, the defense is already asking to remove the word recommended or recommendation. What is all that about, Ryan? I mean, it's a singular word, but it sounds like it's important. I think obviously maybe it shows some bias because it uses the word recommend. So explain what's going on there.
So this is in every death penalty trial litigation case, the defense is going to look for any words that they believe could implicitly, apply some sort of bias or guilt. Now, I will say that the standard criminal jury instructions for death penalty cases, not only in Florida but nationwide, those jury instructions are compiled through extensive meetings and comments and reviews by judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys before ultimately here in Florida being approved by the Supreme Court of Florida. So it is unlikely that the defense will be able to parse out this word or recommendation, because the standard instructions are the standard instructions, and they're created to have some form of uniformity in these types of proceedings, depending upon whether you are in North Florida or down in Key West. So the defense is doing its job by filing these types of motions. And you think about it, especially in death penalty litigation, you're talking about two levels of litigation here. Obviously, at the trial level, you're trying to minimize any innuendos to a jury to make them believe that the preference is death over life. But really, all of these pretrial motions are just setting up the litigation for appeal. And although that litigation will come several years after a trial conviction, what we've seen in Florida over the last dozen years or so is these types of motions have changed Florida's death penalty law on several occasions, dealing with recommendations, the role of a jury, the requirement of a unanimous jury to recommend death. So a lot of it is just posturing arguments for the future.
By the way, before I forget, tonight, 7 o'clock, we've got a great panel, including Tim Jansen, Joe Patuto, and brother counsel. We're back on Charlie Adelson. His motion for his case to be moved back down to a lower court was rejected, and so it's got to go through the normal appellate process now, which is basically a blow to him in terms of a retrial in the very near future. We'll be talking about all that, and there's some court documents that we will be showing you tonight at 7. I realize some of you are not that familiar with this case, so very quickly, Shanna Gardner, she's in none of these photos, but this is Jared Bridegan and his new family. In this one, you see Shanna all the way on the right. This is her estranged husband, who she's like a foot taller than, Mario Fernandez Saldana. And then you've got Henry Tenon, who is the trigger man. Well, on February 16th of 2022, so now 3 years almost, next month will be 3 years. They basically, there was a tire deliberately put in front or in the middle of the road where Jared got out to check on it. He gets out, and when he goes to look at the tire, he's shot and killed. His 2-year-old daughter at the time was in the car. She was unharmed. And then eventually they were able to trace it back to this guy, Henry Tenon, who admitted to the crime and cut a plea deal. And then you've got the two on the right, now estranged, Shanna Gardner, who comes from an extraordinarily wealthy family, and Mario Fernandez Saldana, who does not. One of the interesting things, Ryan, every time I've caught one of these hearings, Mario Fernandez Saldana is in a green jail jumpsuit, and Shanna is in like a demure little outfit, civilian outfit. What's going on there? Is this like inequality of justice?
It is a defense attorney being mindful that there's a lot of coverage on this hearing. And for his client, Shanna, I mean, this is not Jose Baez's first rodeo at all in a high-profile case. And that's something that you want to do to humanize your client, because although jurors are asked if they have seen any media coverage, followed the case, pre-trial, things like that, most of the times they're honest, sometimes they're not, especially in high-profile cases. And if a juror has seen Shanna in the background, as a local news station has covered or something like that, it just gives a different face. So as a defense attorney, you always, your top job, especially in this type of violent case, is to humanize her, to make her appear as if, look, this is a put together, well-dressed woman. Clearly she couldn't be involved in things like murder. But we do see these cases from time to time.
Yeah. Speaking of, money and privilege, Jose Baez is Shanna Gardner's attorney, obviously super well known. My question to you, I mean, in your career, Ryan, when you go up against like a very high powered, well known criminal defense attorney, does it change your game at all?
It shouldn't, but inevitably it does, because one of the things that you're looking for in that type of defense attorney is, how are they positioning and posturing the case? What are they doing from a media perspective? In these types of cases, I think media can be a powerful tool to both prosecutors and defense attorneys, because of even instances like us with the chat here this morning. Being able to see what the attitude of regular people and their opinions on cases is important, because as a prosecutor, I would sometimes want to focus a theory on what was getting traction. As a defense attorney, I'm obviously putting out some theories to see if there is any traction there. And if I'm putting out a defense theory in a pretrial hearing, and as a result, I'm seeing blog posts and social media posts where people are debating the issue, then that tells me that there might be some merit to that type of presentation. Because again, in this type of case, the state's got to convince all 12 jurors, while Mr. Baez only has to convince one of his position. So,
yeah, Ryan. So there's been a lot of back and forth. By the way, this originally said it was starting at 9. It is now 9:41 on the eastern seaboard here, but still no sign of the pool cam. We're keeping an eye on it. Space Coast is keeping an eye on it, and the court in general has been running late. So True Lifestyles here. It's a good job, Ryan, if you can get it. Baez has not been in court since early last year. He's totally remote on this case. How do you get away with that, by the way?
Well, this has been one of the few positive effects of COVID, where for about 15 months we were doing everything digitally and on Zoom. It's the Supreme Court and the Florida Bar have really pushed the initiative of differentiating when attorneys can appear virtually versus in person. And it's a great benefit, because in this type of instance, what it allows clients to do is have good defense attorneys to where I think Jose's practice is in downtown Miami. I mean, that's 6 hours to Jacksonville, and no real direct flight there. So it does help practitioners and attorneys be able to take cases where they normally wouldn't as much, and it helps clients and defendants and parties have wider access to competent legal counsel.
Yeah. By the way, this is interesting. Well, I've got two here. Let's go to Bill Davis, who's on the screen. Does everyone think that Shanna's defense is going to be to sell out her current husband and claim it was him by himself? What do you say, Ryan? That's maybe the only shot they have, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's the defense here, and it's if I'm arguing this case, I'm arguing to a jury. There's a difference between running your mouth about how much you hate your ex and how awful your ex is, and they are, the worst of the worst. And I'm sure a lot of exes have said in frustration, gosh, it would just be better if they weren't here, or, issues with kids and things like that. So I'm arguing here that Shanna ran her mouth, but there's a difference between somebody running their mouth out of frustration and somebody saying, I want you to have him killed. And the devil is in the details here. Now, if there are joint bank accounts and the money's coming from joint bank accounts, especially because the now estranged husband was not somebody of wealth, well, then that's a problem for her. Now, again, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to position this case. This is a reasonable doubt case. This isn't was she fully involved or not. It is an argument of, has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt that, in fact, Shanna wanted her ex-husband killed and went to her then current husband to do that. And that's going to be a tough case for the state. But in the same sense, it looks like a duck and walks like a duck here. And I agree with you. Although that's the best defense, that's a big hill to climb for her.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Jared Ross, our friend of the show. He said maybe there's some type of double extortion theory coming off the Adelson trials here. Worked so well for Charlie Adelson. Yeah, I don't think they're gonna go with that one. But Ryan, what people are saying, and this is true. This family, Shanna Gardner's family, is worth tens of millions of dollars, from what I understand. What about a civil lawsuit? Do those always have to wait and have the criminal trials, precede them before they can go to that?
That's a really great question, and yes, in almost all instances, the wrongful death trial is put on hold until after the criminal case for several reasons. Notwithstanding the fact that, remember, in a civil trial alone, normally Shanna would not have the right to remain silent. Now, if there's a pending criminal trial at the same time, then she can invoke her right to remain silent. And a lot of times the adverse party is a very powerful witness for you in a civil injury case or a wrongful death case. Oftentimes also, the civil case is going to wait because I want to see what's happening in the criminal case. I want to see what witnesses are going to actually say, because their former testimony in some instances can be admitted in the civil case as direct evidence, and it definitely can be introduced as impeachment evidence.
Yeah. Speaking about equality between the sexes here, it should be equal pay for equal work. But what about this? They rarely put women on death row. Is this true? I mean, it seems to be true. Or is it just that women commit less death penalty eligible crimes, Ryan?
No, I haven't seen the exact specifics, but just sort of anecdotally from being an attorney for 20 years, women are charged less with first degree murder. But when you look here in Florida, there are a handful of women on death row. I think, don't hold me to it, but I believe less than 10, although there are about 400 people on death row total in the state of Florida. So I do think some of it is just the nature of crime. But I do think that there's a huge implicit, at the very least, bias that a woman could not be in the place to commit an aggravated homicide through financial gain or through a heinous, atrocious, and cruel crime, or a cold, calculated, premeditated type crime. And I think for jurors, it's hard to put a female defendant into that box, which, right or wrong, is something that we can talk about all day long. But I think it's important for people to realize that the criminal justice system contains and involves people. And we can say that we're going to leave our bias at the door. We can say that we're just going to focus on this case. The state can say, and the government can say, that they're going to present a case that's both with the good and the bad to their case. A judge can say that they're going to be fair and impartial, but that judge could have stubbed his toe on the way to the bench. That prosecutor could have had the residue of 30 years of trials and cynicism. A juror could look at somebody dressed really well as a female and say, I don't think that that's the violent type of person that should go to death row or be executed. These are just the realities that we live with. And I think it's hard to remember that, especially with this type of case that is so calculated and unnecessarily brutal.
Yeah. Oh, I see a little bit of court maneuvering. It looks like the pool camera is up. Space Coast is going to bring that up full on the screen in just a moment. There's an interesting comment. What was that? It just passed me by. But Ryan, one of the other big problems for her are text messages, including, like we see in the Markell case, there's like coded language. Let's see here if there's courtroom audio. This is courtesy of First Coast News.
After those depositions on February 3rd.
We're going to listen in with Ryan, former homicide prosecutor in Florida. He will tell us what's happening. And there's the pool camera. Gotta love the pool camera. It's awesome. But Ron, while we're waiting for that to come back up, it will in a second. Meanwhile, this guy's being fired from the station in Jacksonville. So there is coded language, and we saw that with Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson. It's going to come in at Donna Adelson's trial, but one of the words that in this case that they were using were funeral potatoes. She also at one point texted a friend saying she had a desire for Jared Bridegan to quote unquote disappear. Of course, the defense says, you know, it's all taken out of context, but jurors are not idiots, right? I mean, this is going to be tough because it's their own language.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing that always amazes me about these cases is you have people creating this code language that is really similar to what they're doing. You know, somebody disappearing and somebody being killed. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. My teenage boys could probably put those together. But this is also the difference, Joel, between, frankly, those who get caught and those that don't. And if I'm a prosecutor, I'm going to argue that creating my own homicide language further shows Shanna's involvement and her knowledge of involvement enough to have to be, you know, really careful of her words and to create a language to try to avoid detection. That's consciousness of guilt to me as a prosecutor. As a defense attorney, it is what it is. You know, I would expect the defense will argue that these are taken out of context. And again, this is where it's just a fundamental difference between the job of the prosecutor and the government versus the defense, where if, as the defense attorney, I'm focusing on one or two, maybe three people in that jury box that I think through jury selection may be open to that type of argument. You're not going to convince 12 jurors that disappear means murder. But I could convince 2 or 3 jurors that there is a reasonable question about what that word means. And if I can coalesce 2 or 3 jurors in that jury room, then maybe I get this case to hang, or I get it as a conviction to a lesser crime. So remember, some cases are about winning it outright for the defense. Oftentimes, the defense's job is to mitigate the exposure as much as possible.
This is true here from Cynthia Sweezy. I think it's actually the end of this month. Stefan Stearns in Ryan's basically home county. He is accused in the murder of 13-year-old Maddie Soto, but he's facing some horrific sex crime charges. And we'll be there, and I'm hoping Ryan will jump in with us for that one. So that's going to be the end of the month. That's going to be tough to even listen to. What do you think of that, Ryan? Do you think that case is going to move forward in January? I've just been curious as to why not bring the murder charges and the, all the sex-related charges together. Hang on, COE?
Hi, so I just rewatched it. Space Ghost, if we can re-rack it from the beginning and watch it over again, I believe that was the hearing. It was very fast. They set deposition dates and said that they were going to come back after that. So it was maybe 45 seconds.
The whole hearing?
Yeah, so we're going to play it from the beginning. It's really fast, and then Ryan, you can obviously share your expertise.
You can break down the 45 seconds. Oh boy.
I'll do the best I can. Let me get my notepad out.
All right, here we go.
Gardner, and I will waive her appearance before the court for purposes of this pretrial.
All right, thank you. And so my understanding is that the lawyers have deposition dates.
Yes, sir.
Coming.
The deposition is Thursday and then set for January 24th.
That's right. And then
And
March 6th and 7th.
And March 26th and
March
27th.
yes,
All right, we're gonna come back then, after those depositions on February 3rd. And that's our free to go,
thank you. Your Honor.
both cases, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Sometimes if you sneeze, you miss a hearing. This actually happened to us a couple of weeks ago with Courtney Clenny, the so-called OnlyFans model. So, Ryan, what the hell was that? Why waste the court's time? Couldn't they have done that in a different way? They basically just set deposition dates, and they're going to be back on February 3rd.
Yeah, these types of hearings happen for a couple of reasons. The first is the court wants to make sure that everybody's moving a case to trial, especially these death cases, because they can take 4 and 5, 6 years to get to trial. So proactive judges are going to bring the parties into court to make sure that the case is moving along. And the reason for that is as they get closer to the actual trial date or the projected trial date, what you don't want is one of the sides coming in at the last minute saying, we've not been able to take depositions, or the other side has been obstructive, or they haven't given us discovery. So therefore, we want to continue the case. So a bit of this is micromanaging. Now, you tend to see this also in cases where there's either going to be a large use of judicial resource. So from what I've read, that they expect this case could go multiple weeks. And in a high profile case, you might have to bring in 400 or 500 prospective jurors. That takes a lot of manpower, a lot of person power to be able to get the jury services and those sorts of things. Oftentimes, courthouses will have one large courtroom where they do higher profile trials or larger jury trials, and those get reserved months in advance. So some of it is just protecting judicial resource. The other part to it is when parties don't get along well and don't talk. And we've seen that here in this case where the defense has been relentless in attacking the state attorney's office and the specific prosecutors that have been assigned to the case. So oftentimes those parties are not voluntarily talking as they should, and the court has to drag them in to almost be a mediator.
Yeah. One final thing that I'm curious about. I'm always curious about the inside baseball. So a guy like Jose Baez, who again is this high profile, kind of living off his name with Casey Anthony, Aaron Hernandez, these other trials. What does he do kind of day to day? And if you're I don't know, brave enough, is he on a like a flat fee here? How do his payments work?
So I can't speak to Jose personally, but most criminal defense cases are going to be flat fee cases, and they're going to be flat fee upfront, non-refundable types of fees. It's very, very common. Of course, depending upon the nature of the case, the defense attorney is going to estimate how much time he thinks he's going to have, or they're going to have in the case, and quote a fee accordingly. Now, as sort of the lead attorney, you see in this case that there are several other attorneys working with Jose Baez on this case. In most instances, those other attorneys are going to be the ones that are doing the heavy lifting. They're going to be doing a lot of the document reviews, the witness preparations, where they're feeding the information up the food chain. I would expect that Jose would be involved in some of the larger depositions, maybe with more lead case agents and things like that. But on a smaller, maybe not as significant of a witness, it's not really worth the time to be involved in those types of depositions. And you have to remember, attorneys and law firms are for-profit businesses, just like so many other ones. And so much of the business side of law is procuring clients and managing media profiles and running the operations of a firm, meeting with prospective clients and those sorts of things. So the real upper echelon notoriety type attorneys are going to be doing almost more media than practice, so to speak. But he will definitely be there for the trial, and he'll be prepared for the trial, but not in essence, doing some of the groundwork.
Well said. It's probably the most I've ever talked for a 45-second hearing. We've been going about an hour, 40 minutes on air. And literally, if you're just joining us, the hearing turned out to be a 45-second hearing setting deposition dates. Hang on one sec. Hey, COE, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Since this was a 45-second deposition, we've got the pool camera for our friend YNW Melly, the double murder trial out of Broward. Do you want to, we'll let Ryan go, but do you want to switch over to that? Does the chat want to watch that? Is that a problem in terms of anything?
We can ask the chat.
Okay, let's do that. Why don't we thank Ryan? Ryan, I know you have a day job, so appreciate you being here, man.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll call on you soon, and hopefully when we're up there covering stuff on Stearns, you'll be there with us.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
All right, man. Have a great
Thanks.
day. Have a great week. All right, happy 2025.
You
All right. So then there was one, and that would be me. Does the chat want to watch the YNW Melly double murder? This is a Florida rapper here in Broward County, and he is accused back in 2019 after a late night recording session of killing two of his close friends and then making it seem like it was all part of a drive-by shooting. So it's interesting. I'll be obviously very honest, and you'll know this very quickly because I don't know much about it. But it is in Broward County, which is basically 20 minutes from where I'm sitting, 25 minutes. So COE, how would we do this if you're there? And that, by the way, was the Shanna Gardner hearing. Yet Nanouf says it hasn't started yet. So I think maybe COE can build a StreamYard and we can have everyone link into the first Melly trial. Ned is letting us know was a hung jury here. So hang on one sec, everybody. We're all family. So I know you won't mind this. COE, rule number 1 of producing, let the guy talking know what's going on. Is there a way to set up a StreamYard and then whatever that word is, redirect everybody? Could we do that?
Yeah, I can put up a poll too and poll STS Nation to see what they want to do. Hold on.
Krista says put up a poll. Ned Smith says the prosecution in the first trial was horrible. Yeah, please tell me about YNW Melly because I haven't followed it until now. Look at Jimmy McNutty. All of a sudden, guy said that we were getting off the beaten path by doing some alien shows. Now he's back. Cynthia Sweeney, have not followed that case. Too many players. Jimmy McNutty, I plan to watch the second Melly trial. I think he had a free Melly read person on that on that jury. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year. Bichon Mama, hello. And COE, I'm just gonna wait on you for this one. Again, if you guys are just joining us, if you didn't see the alien show about the Vegas aliens that we did over the holiday, You need to check it out. Please check that out. It's really interesting. It's Scott Roeder, who's a crime scene reconstruction expert. Well, he created a report. He watched every frame back in, I think it was 2023, April. This family in Las Vegas claims that they saw aliens in their backyard. I think most of you probably remember this. And it was like it was not a joke. It was not a prank. It was obvious that they were, Dr. Von Decay says no aliens, no rappers. But it was very obvious that this was not a family that was joking around. They call in, they say, hey, we saw these alien-like creatures. Even the police were really kind of like baffled and stunned because they saw something that looked like what appeared to be a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Long story short, Scott Roeder and this guy who's basically he's a journalist who now focuses on this sort of thing, like extra, like the paranormal. Scott and him teamed up, but Scott is an actual crime scene reconstruction expert. He worked on the Oscar Pistorius case. And long story short, he created a court document that he would be using in a court of law to prove why they were, in fact, aliens. He went through every frame of video. And I got to tell you, yeah, Alien Show was wild. After watching it, it was pretty fascinating. So I'll leave it at that. Also, give Rob D'Amico. There we go, Joel. Why don't we end the show and regroup? Rob D'Amico, too, by the way. I did a show with him and a couple of NYPD detectives, but Rob D'Amico is a true American hero, putting his life on the line. And when you hear this story about putting away pirates or Somali pirates that attacked Americans, obviously overseas, off the waters of Somalia, and these were civilian people, just two couples from the California area. Anyway, Rob D'Amico jumped into action within 3 hours, hopped on a flight to Somalia, and then was in the middle of gunfights and other things. And it's a wild story. Definitely worth your time. So I'm going to take the COE's advice. We're back at 7 o'clock for sure on Charlie Adelson. And maybe we'll come back. Maybe we'll come back on this Melly case in just a little bit and let you watch that since it's here in our neck of the woods. And tomorrow, the Alexander brothers, these three horrible brothers come from one family, are accused of some of the worst sex crimes imaginable. Two have already been denied pretrial release. The third one got pushed to tomorrow, so I'm planning to go there and then give you a live update and then maybe give you a little video tour of the life that they once had, because I don't think it's going to last much longer. I think they're going to be spending a lot of time in prison eventually. But with that said, love you, America. Great to be back in 2025. This is going to be our best year yet. We're doing a lot of crazy new things, and we'll keep you posted. You can follow me on Instagram, Surviving Survivor, Twitter at Podcast STS. We will see you. Keep an eye out because we might be doing the Melly case in just a few minutes. We'll let you know. Take care.